My 5-year-old daughter was standing in the driveway holding her stuffed bear, while aftershock dust still hung in the air. My father looked at her, then looked at me, and said, "You can stay, but not her. There's no space." His wife's grandchildren had 3 rooms between them, including a game room. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I just said, "Noted." 3 days later, my father opened his front door to a man in a suit holding a certified envelope, and his face lost every ounce of color. My name is Stella Prescott. I'm 34, an ER nurse, and a single mom. And this is the story of how I stopped begging my family for a place at their table and took back what was mine. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Now, let me take you back to a Tuesday in October, the day the ground shook, and everything I thought I knew about my family cracked wide open. There's a particular kind of tired that only ER nurses understand. It isn't just in your bones. It lives behind your eyes, in the space between your thoughts, in the way your hands still smell like nitrile gloves 2 showers later. That Tuesday morning, I came through the front door of our second-floor apartment on Maple Ridge Avenue at 7:15 a.m., 12 hours of chest compressions and IV lines still buzzing in my fingers, and the first thing I saw was Lily. She was sitting at the kitchen table in her unicorn pajamas, bare feet dangling off the chair, a blue crayon in her fist. Biscuit, her stuffed bear, loved bald along one ear, sat propped beside her cereal bowl like a tiny breakfast companion. She didn't look up right away. She was drawing. "Mama, look." She held up the paper. A rectangle with a triangle roof, 2 crooked windows, and a red door we didn't actually have. Above the roofline, she'd drawn 2 hearts, just floating there, like they were keeping the house from blowing away. "That's our house, Mama." I taped it to the fridge next to last week's butterfly. That fridge door was the only gallery that mattered. I made her a sandwich. Peanut butter, crust cut off, sliced into a butterfly shape because I'd done it once when she was 3, and now it was law. My eyes were closing on their own. But I sat with her, and we talked about the butterfly, and I plugged in the little star-shaped nightlight she couldn't sleep without, even during daytime naps. On the shelf by the hallway closet, there was a cardboard box with Mom's things written in my own handwriting from years ago. My mother's belongings, what little I'd kept. I hadn't opened it fully in years. I wish I had sooner. Let me tell you about Thanksgiving. Last November, my father Gerald invited me and Lily to his house for the holiday. "Family's family," he said on the phone, in the voice he uses when he wants to sound warm but doesn't quite get there. I bought a new dress for Lily, sunflower yellow, her favorite. I made a sweet potato casserole from scratch at 2 in the morning between shifts. When we arrived, the dining room table was set for 8. China plates, cloth napkins, the works. My stepmother Diane had outdone herself. Candles, a centerpiece with dried eucalyptus, place cards written in her careful cursive. Lily's name wasn't on any of them. "Oh, sweetie," Diane said, her hand fluttering to her chest the way it does when she's about to say something terrible with a smile. "The kids' table is so much cozier for Lily. It's right in the kitchen, she'll love it." The kids' table was a folding card table with paper plates. Lily sat there alone. My half-sister Megan's 2 children, 7 and 4, were at the main table, flanking my father like little sentries. Gerald had his arm around Megan's oldest, ruffling his hair. "There's my boy." When Lily waved at him from the kitchen doorway, he nodded. Just a nod. Like she was a neighbor's kid he was being polite to. I cut Lily's turkey into small pieces. I told myself, at least she has grandparents. At least she has somewhere to go on holidays. I'd been telling myself that for 24 years. At one point during dinner, Diane stepped into the hallway to take a phone call. I heard 2 words before she lowered her voice. Birchwood House. I didn't know what that meant. Not then. I should explain something about the math in my father's house. It's a particular kind of arithmetic where one daughter's needs always round up and the others always round down. Megan, my half-sister, 29, Diane's biological daughter, got a car at 19. A used Honda, nothing extravagant, but Gerald drove it to the house with a bow on the hood. When I turned 19, I was already working nights at a nursing home to pay for community college. No car, no beau. When I asked once, just once, Gerald said, "Megan needs help. You're independent. You should be proud." I filed that sentence away. I filed a lot of sentences away. Megan's daycare? Gerald paid. My student loans? Mine. Megan's rent when she moved back in with 2 kids? 0, because she never left. My rent? 38% of a paycheck that was already stretched across diapers, formula, and a second-floor apartment with a radiator that banged like a fist all winter. Every time I noticed the gap, I'd hear Diane's voice in my head. "You're so sensitive, Stella." Or Gerald's. "Don't start." After enough years, I stopped starting, I stopped noticing, or I told myself I did. But Lily noticed things I tried not to. One Sunday, she came home from Gerald's house and showed me a drawing she'd made. Our family. She'd drawn 6 people. Me, her, Gerald, Diane, Megan, and Megan's kids. In the picture, everyone was holding hands in a line. Except Lily. She'd drawn herself standing a little to the side, holding Biscuit. "Mama, how come I'm always the extra one?" She was 4 when she said that. I didn't know then that my independence wasn't something I'd chosen. It was something they'd stolen from me. Literally. The earthquake hit at 2:47 on a Tuesday afternoon. I had just picked Lily up from preschool. We were in the apartment. She was on the living room rug showing Biscuit a picture book when the floor moved. Not shook. Moved. Like something massive had turned over beneath us. The bookshelf went first. It swayed once and then tipped forward, spilling paperbacks and picture frames across the carpet. Lily screamed. I grabbed her and pulled us both under the kitchen table, my body over hers, my hand pressing her head against my chest. I could feel her heart hammering through her shirt, fast, small, like a bird trapped in a paper bag. The shaking lasted 11 seconds. It felt like a year. Then the aftershock, 15 minutes later. Shorter, but enough to crack the load-bearing wall in the hallway from floor to ceiling. A chunk of ceiling plaster came down in the bathroom. Dust hung in the air like fog. The building groaned. By evening, the landlord arrived with a city inspector. Red tag. The building was structurally compromised, pending full inspection. Everyone out by tomorrow morning. I stood in the parking lot with Lily on my hip, watching our neighbors carry boxes to their cars. I called my renter's insurance from the hood of my Corolla. Coverage for damaged belongings? Yes. Temporary housing assistance? No. Not under my policy. The nearest motel was $89 a night. I had $1,100 in checking. That was rent money. That was all of it. Lily was quiet. She had Biscuit in a death grip, and her eyes were glassy, and she kept looking back at the building like she was waiting for it to fall. There was one number I hadn't dialed in months, my father's. I sat in my car in the parking lot and made the call. Gerald picked up on the 4th ring. I could hear a television in the background. Some game show, audience applause, Diane laughing at something. Normal evening sounds in a house with 4 bedrooms and a game room and no structural cracks running down the walls. "Dad, we had an earthquake. Our building's been red tagged. Lily and I need a place to stay for a couple of weeks until I figure something out." Silence. Then, "Hold on." I heard him set the phone down. Muffled voices. Diane's voice. Low, quick, sharp. I couldn't make out the words, but I knew the tone. I'd been hearing that tone for 24 years. It was the tone that preceded every no I'd ever received in that house, always wrapped in something reasonable. Gerald came back on. He cleared his throat. "You can come, Stella, but Diane says there's no room for the girl. Megan's kids have their rooms, the game room. You know how it is. It's tight. Dad, she's 5. She can sleep on my floor, on a sleeping bag. She just needs a safe place." Another pause. Diane's voice again, clearer this time, close to the phone. "Tell her it's only temporary anyway. The girl can stay with a friend or something." The girl? Not Lily, not your granddaughter. The girl. Gerald sighed. It's Diane's house, too. She says no space. Just you. We can figure something out for the child. I looked in the rearview mirror. Lily was in her car seat, biscuit pulled tight to her chin, watching the red-tagged building through the window, dust still in her hair. Noted, I said, and I hung up. I drove. I didn't know where yet. I just needed the car to move, needed the road to unspool in front of me so I wouldn't have to sit still with what had just happened. The streetlights were coming on. Caldwell looked the same as it always did at 6:30 in the evening. People walking dogs, sprinklers running on lawns, the taco truck parked outside the hardware store. The world hadn't ended. It just felt like it. Lily was quiet for 6 blocks. Then, "Mama, are we going to Grandpa's house?" My hands tightened on the wheel. "No, baby, we're going to Auntie Rachel's." "Oh." A pause, then smaller. "Is it because Grandpa doesn't have room for me?" I almost hit the curb. Am I too big? I pulled over. I put the car in park on a residential street I didn't recognize, under a sycamore tree that was dropping leaves onto the windshield, and I turned around in my seat. Lily wasn't crying. Her eyes were wide and serious, and she was looking down at Biscuit like she was asking him the same question. I reached back and took her hand. It was so small. It was always so small. "Lily, you are not too big. You are not too much. And you will always, always have room with me. Do you understand?" She nodded, hugged Biscuit, looked out the window. She didn't cry, and somehow, that was worse than if she had. I turned back to the road and drove. My jaw ached from clenching. Something had shifted inside me. Not the hot kind of anger, not the kind that makes you shout. Something colder. Something with patience. I opened my phone's notes app at the next red light and typed, October 14th, 6:22 p.m. Gerald refused shelter for Lily. Diane. No space. Direct quote, the girl. That was timestamp number 1. Rachel didn't ask a single question. She opened the door, saw Lily on my hip with dust still in her hair, saw the duffel bag over my shoulder and whatever was living on my face, and stepped aside. "Guest room's made up. There's mac and cheese on the stove." That was Rachel Tobin, 35, fellow ER nurse, built like a point guard and just as direct. She'd been my person since our first code blue together 6 years ago, when she'd looked at me over a crashing patient and said, "You're good at this. Don't let anyone tell you different." We'd been friends since. She put on a cartoon for Lily, made her a cup of warm milk with honey. Within 5 minutes, Lily was asleep on Rachel's couch, Biscuit tucked under her chin, her breathing finally slow and even. First real rest since 2:47 that afternoon. Rachel handed me a mug of tea I hadn't asked for and sat down across from me. "Tell me," I told her. She didn't interrupt. She didn't gasp. When I finished, she said very quietly, "That's not a space problem, Stella. That's a priority problem." At 9 o'clock, my phone buzzed. Gerald. "Stella, don't be dramatic. Diane didn't mean it like that. She just meant the house is tight right now. You know Megan's kids need their rooms for school. Lily is 5. She needs a floor and a blanket. Your house has 4 bedrooms. You're twisting things. You always do this. This is why it's hard with you." I stared at the ceiling. Classic. Turn the victim into the problem. I hung up and opened Instagram. Megan had posted 2 hours ago a photo of the game room with 2 new beanbag chairs, sparkle filter, caption, "Best surprise for my babies. #blessed #family. First, I screenshotted it." Timestamp number 2. The next morning, my phone rang while I was pouring Lily's cereal. The screen read, Diane Whitmore. In 7 years of having her number, she had never once called me directly. Every communication went through Gerald, a system she'd designed, I realized much later, so there'd never be a record of her own words. Until now. "Stella, sweetie, hi." Warm, musical. The voice she uses at school functions and church picnics. "I am just so sorry about the earthquake. I've been thinking about you all night." "Thank you, Diane. Listen, I talked to your father and we really do want to help. You are welcome here, of course you are. But I think it would be better for everyone if Lily stayed with your friend for a bit. Just until things settle. Megan's youngest just started sleeping through the night, and you know how it is. Another child in the house. The disruption. Lily isn't disruption. She's 5, and she's quiet. Oh, sweetie, I don't mean it like that. She's just a lot, you know, active. And honestly, she lowered her voice, as if sharing a confidence. If you'd had a husband, this wouldn't even be an issue, would it? The kitchen faucet dripped twice. I watched a bead of water fall. I didn't take the bait. Not the husband comment, not the tone, not the sweetie. I let 5 seconds of silence sit there. I understand your position, Diane, clearly. Oh, good, sweetie, I'm so glad we can. I said I understand it. I didn't say I accept it. Don't call me about this again. I hung up. Then I wrote down every word in my notes app while it was fresh. Timestamp number 3. And there was something Diane had said. A small thing. Maybe nothing. Besides, this house was supposed to be for our family anyway. This house. Supposed to be. Our family. Anyway. I didn't know what it meant. But I underlined it. That night, after Lily was asleep, I lay on Rachel's guest bed and let the memories come. Not the soft focus kind, the accounting kind. My 16th birthday, Megan, then 11, had gotten a full party the year before. Catered, 30 kids, a DJ in the garage. For my 16, Gerald handed me a card with a $20 bill and said, "We forgot to plan something. Sorry, kid." Diane was in Cancun with her sister that week. Nobody forgot. I just wasn't worth remembering. My nursing school graduation, 4 years of night shifts and study sessions in hospital break rooms, and I walked across that stage alone. Gerald said he couldn't make it. Megan had a dance recital. A recital. For an 11-year-old. He chose a pirouette over a diploma. The day Lily was born. Gerald showed up at the hospital 20 minutes after delivery. He stood in the doorway. Didn't hold her. Didn't sit down. "You should have waited until you were married," he said. Then he left. Diane didn't come at all. When Megan had her first baby 3 years later, Diane moved in for 3 weeks. Gerald bought an $800 crib and cried in the delivery room. I kept a list of these moments for years. Not written down, just etched into the soft tissue of my memory. The Christmas I was 13, and found 3 gifts under the tree for me, and 11 for Megan. The Easters where Lily's basket was a paper bag. The way Diane introduced me at neighborhood barbecues. "This is Gerald's daughter from before." From before. Like I was a rough draft. But the worst thing they ever did to me wasn't a forgotten birthday or a skipped graduation. It was the thing they took. The thing I didn't even know existed. Not yet. But that was about to change. For years I carried this question like a stone in my pocket. Was I the difficult one? Was I too sensitive? Too needy? Too much? The way they always said? I rearranged myself so many times to fit into that family that I forgot what my original shape looked like. I wonder if you know that feeling. If you've ever shrunk yourself to keep the peace, and then one day looked in the mirror and couldn't find what was missing. Tell me in the comments, because I don't think I was the only one folding herself into smaller and smaller squares. I need to tell you about my grandmother. Her name was Edith Prescott, my mother's mother. After my mom died in a car accident when I was 8, Grandma Edith was the one who kept me breathing. Every other weekend she'd pick me up in her green Buick and drive me to her little house on Birchwood Street. I remember the lavender bushes along the front walk, the way the kitchen always smelled like cornbread and coffee, the creak of the porch swing where she'd read to me until the fireflies came out. Then Gerald married Diane. I was 10. The visits got shorter, then less frequent. Then Gerald started saying things. "Grandma's getting forgetful, Stella. It's too hard for her." Then, she moved. Somewhere in Arizona, I think. Then, "She doesn't want to confuse you, sweetheart. It's better this way." By 12, I stopped asking. I believed him. I believed that the woman who used to braid my hair and sing me hymns in the kitchen had simply decided I wasn't worth the drive anymore. That grief does that to people. That maybe she looked at me and saw my dead daughter, and it was too much. I carried that for 22 years. The belief that I had been gently, lovingly abandoned by the last person on my mother's side who might have claimed me. But lying in Rachel's guest room that night, staring at the ceiling, one word floated up through the dark. Birchwood. Diane had said the Birchwood house on the phone at Thanksgiving. My grandmother had lived on Birchwood Street. I sat up. My pulse was doing something it only does in the ER. That focused clinical acceleration that means something important is happening. I walked to the closet. The box marked Mom's Things was on top of the stack. I opened it. It was 2 a.m. Rachel's house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the small ticking of a wall clock somewhere down the hall. I sat cross-legged on the guest room floor and lifted the flaps of the box I'd carried through 4 apartments and never fully unpacked. My mother's reading glasses, tortoiseshell, one arm bent, a scarf that still smelled faintly like her, or maybe I just needed it to. 3 birthday cards she'd written me before she died, tucked in a rubber band. A small gold locket with a photo of us, me at 5, her at 31, the same age I was when I had Lily. At the bottom, underneath a folded quilt, there was a large manila envelope. It was yellowed at the edges, postmarked 2003, and the return address read, Edith Prescott, 412 Birchwood Street, Caldwell, California, 93711. My hands were shaking when I opened it. Inside, a letter, handwritten on lavender stationery in my grandmother's careful script, and behind the letter, a stapled document, dense, legal, notarized. The letter read, My dearest Stella, your mama would want you to always have a home. I've set up a trust for you. The Prescott Family Trust. The house on Birchwood and $210,000 in savings. When you turn 25, it's all yours. I love you, baby girl. Don't let anyone tell you you're not wanted. Grandma Edith. The document was a copy of the trust deed, dated 2004. The Prescott Family Trust. Sole beneficiary, Stella Marie Prescott. Trustee, Gerald A. Whitmore. I turned 25 in 2016. That was 9 years ago. Nobody told me. Not once. Not ever. A trust. A house. $210,000. And my father, the man who said there was no room for Lily, was the one holding the keys. I didn't sleep. I sat on that guest room floor with the trust deed spread across my lap and opened my phone. First search, 412 Birchwood Street, Caldwell, California. The county assessor's office had the records online. Property, single-family residence, 1,420 square feet, built 1967. Current ownership status, sold, April 2019. Transferee, Gerald A. Whitmore and Diane K. Whitmore. Transfer type, quitclaim deed. Sale price recorded, $0. $0. A free transfer from the Prescott Family Trust to my father and his wife, on a house that was supposed to be mine. Second search, Edith Prescott, Caldwell, California. Results, Sunridge Senior Community, Tucson, Arizona. Resident profile, Activities Committee member, age, 82. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. She was alive. She was in Tucson. She was on an activities committee. She hadn't disappeared. She hadn't forgotten me. She hadn't chosen to stop caring. She'd been cut off. The same way you cut a phone line, deliberately at the source, so the person on the other end thinks nobody's calling. I went back to the property records. The trail was simple once you knew where to look. In 2019, Gerald transferred 412 Birchwood from the trust to himself and Diane, using a quitclaim deed that apparently bore my signature. That same spring, they sold their old house across town. Used the Birchwood equity and the trust funds as a down payment on their current home. The 4-bedroom with the game room and the beanbag chairs, and absolutely no space for a 5-year-old girl with a stuffed bear. My father had stolen my inheritance, sold my grandmother's house, and used the money to build a home where my daughter wasn't welcome. I closed the laptop. My hands were steady now. steady as they've ever been, and I was done being sensitive. I waited until 7 in the morning, Arizona time, to call. I didn't want to scare an 82-year-old woman. I also didn't trust my voice yet, so I paced Rachel's backyard in the gray morning light, rehearsing what to say, until I realized there was no way to rehearse something like this. Sunridge Senior Community's front desk patched me through. 3 rings. Then a voice, thin but clear, with the same slight rasp I remembered from childhood bedtime stories. Hello? Grandma, it's Stella. Silence. 1 second, 2, 3. I heard a sharp intake of breath. Stella, is that baby girl? And I broke. Not loud, I'm not a loud crier, but the tears came fast and hot, and I pressed my hand over my mouth in Rachel's backyard and let 22 years of believing I'd been forgotten drain out of me. She was crying too. I could hear it in the way her words caught. I've been writing to you every Christmas for 22 years, she said. Every single one came back. Your father told me you didn't want contact. He said you'd moved on. He said it would only confuse Lily to have... He told me the same thing about you. Another silence. This one heavier. I told her what I'd found. The trust deed, the property transfer, the $0 quitclaim. I heard her breathing change, sharpen. I never authorized any sale or withdrawal, Stella. Never. That trust was for you. Only you. Grandma, I think he forged my signature. A long pause. When she spoke again, her voice wasn't thin anymore. It was steel. Then we're going to get it back. Every cent. Every brick. She told me she still had copies of everything, including 22 return-to-sender envelopes. Every Christmas letter she'd mailed me, sent back in Gerald's handwriting. Call a lawyer, baby girl. Today. I'll tell you exactly which documents to ask for. Rachel knew a guy. Actually, Rachel knew a guy who knew a guy. Her cousin's divorce attorney, who referred us to Nathan Okafor, a trust and estate litigation lawyer with an office on Caldwell Boulevard and 15 years of experience peeling apart exactly this kind of mess. I called him that afternoon. He had an opening the next morning. His office smelled like printer toner and black coffee. He was tall, mid-40s, with reading glasses he kept pushing up his nose, and a calm that reminded me of the best surgeons I'd worked with, the ones who never raise their voice because they don't need to. I laid everything on his desk. The trust deed, my grandmother's letter, the property records printout, the quitclaim transfer. He read each document once, then again, then removed his glasses and looked at me. Ms. Prescott, as trustee, your father had a fiduciary duty to manage this trust solely in your interest. Selling the property and distributing the funds without your knowledge or consent is a breach of that duty. And if your signature on these documents is forged? He tapped the quitclaim deed. That's felony forgery under California Penal Code 470. He outlined the steps. First, a beneficiary request letter. Certified mail. Return receipt. To Pacific Western Trust Company demanding all distribution records, withdrawal authorizations, and associated signatures. The bank had 30 days to respond. Second, once we had the documents, a forensic document examiner would compare the signatures. He already had someone. Dr. Laura Sims, court qualified, frequently used by the DA's office. If the signatures don't match, Nathan said, we file a petition in probate court and refer the forgery to the district attorney. This isn't just a civil matter, Ms. Prescott. This is potentially criminal. Then he said the thing that stopped me cold. One more thing. If those trust funds were used as a down payment on your father's current home, that house is traceable proceeds, meaning the house they told your daughter there was no room in may not even legally be theirs. You know what I kept thinking, sitting in that leather chair with the trust deed in my lap? That every time Gerald said, "You're independent, you should be proud," he wasn't complimenting me. He was covering his tracks. Every time Diane said, "You're so sensitive," she was making sure I'd never look too closely. They turned my own self-doubt into a lock on a door I didn't know existed. Have you ever realized that the thing people criticized you for was actually protecting them? Not you? I think about that a lot now. Nathan mailed the beneficiary request that same afternoon. Certified. Return receipt requested. Tracking number logged. The letter went to Pacific Western Trust Company's Legal Compliance Department, demanding every document associated with the Prescott Family Trust, distribution authorizations, withdrawal receipts, notarized signatures, correspondence. 30 days to respond? 30 days. In the ER, 30 minutes can mean the difference between a save and a code. 30 days felt like a geological age, but Nathan was clear. Don't tip them off. Don't confront your father. Don't mention the trust, Birchwood, or your grandmother. If he suspects you're building a case, he'll destroy what he can. So I played the part. The hardest role I've ever held. And I've held a mother's hand while telling her that her son didn't make it. Gerald called twice that week. Casual, checking in, asking if I'd figured things out with housing. His voice was so normal it made my skin crawl. Normal the way a bandage looks clean when the wound underneath is septic. Working on it, I said. That was all I gave him. On Thursday, he called again. You're not still upset about the room thing, are you? Diane feels terrible. He said this the way you'd report weather. Light rain. Diane feels terrible. Might clear up by the weekend. I'm fine, Dad. Good. That's my girl. I hung up and swallowed something hot and sour at the back of my throat. That evening, Lily was at Rachel's kitchen table again, drawing. She held up the new picture. A house. Bigger this time, with 3 windows and a garden and a red door. She'd written 2 words at the top in wobbly kindergarten letters. Our house. This is where we're gonna live, Mama, I decided. I stuck it to the fridge next to the others. Then I went to the bathroom, shut the door, and pressed my forehead against the cool tile until my breathing evened out. 27 days to go. The documents arrived on a Tuesday. Nathan called at 10:14 a.m. Come to my office. Bring nothing. Touch nothing when you get here. I'll show you everything. 40 minutes later, I was sitting across from his desk, and he was laying out 3 documents side by side like a surgeon displaying x-rays. The first, Trust Distribution Authorization, dated March 14, 2019. A request to Pacific Western Trust Company to release $210,000 from the Prescott Family Trust to Gerald A. Whitmore. At the bottom, a signature, Stella M. Prescott. The second, Quitclaim Deed, dated April 2, 2019. Transfer of property at 412 Birchwood Street from the Prescott Family Trust to Gerald A. Whitmore and Diane K. Whitmore. Another signature, Stella M. Prescott. I leaned in close. The handwriting was careful. Someone had practiced, but the S was wrong. I've signed my name 10,000 times on patient charts, on medication orders, on insurance forms. My S starts with a sharp downstroke. This one curved. And my P in Prescott has a closed loop at the top. A habit from my mother's handwriting that I copied as a child. This P was open. It wasn't my signature. It wasn't close. Nathan slid a 3rd page across the desk. Dr. Laura Sims, Forensic Document Examiner, her preliminary analysis. I read the key line. Based on comparison with known exemplars, the questioned signatures exhibit significant divergence in letter formation, pen pressure, and baseline alignment. Preliminary conclusion: high probability the questioned signatures were not produced by the stated signatory. Final report in 10 days, Nathan said. But, Ms. Prescott, it's confirmed. He pointed to the notary stamp on the quitclaim deed. The name printed beneath it, Janet L. Fry. He'd already looked her up. Janet Fry was a friend of Diane's. They'd worked together at the school district for years. A notarized document signed by someone who wasn't there, stamped by the stepmother's friend. This wasn't carelessness. This was planned. 2 days after the documents arrived, Gerald invited me to dinner. Just me. No drama, no big deal. Diane's making pot roast. We just want to see you. Nathan said, Go. Observe. Say nothing of substance. California is a 2-party consent state, so no recording, but write down everything the moment you leave. I went. The house smelled like rosemary and onions. Diane greeted me at the door with a hug that lasted exactly 1 second too long, the kind designed to be witnessed. Megan was on the couch with her kids, who were running laps between the living room and the game room. The game room, with its beanbag chairs and wall-mounted TV, and enough square footage for a child-sized sleeping bag, if that child's name had been something other than Lily. Dinner was normal. Excessively normal. Diane complimented my scrubs. Gerald asked about the hospital. Megan showed me photos of her kids' Halloween costumes on her phone. Everyone smiled. Nobody mentioned the earthquake. Nobody mentioned the fact that my daughter was sleeping at a friend's house because this family had turned her away. Then, between the pot roast and dessert, Gerald leaned back in his chair and said, casually, the way you'd ask someone to pass the salt, "Hey, by the way, you haven't been getting any weird mail, have you? Some trust company sent something to our address by mistake. Junk mail, probably." His eyes sharpened, just for a second, just enough for me to see. "Trust company," I said. "No. Why would they?" He relaxed, reached for his water glass. "No reason, just junk." Diane changed the subject to Megan's birthday party next weekend. I helped clear the plates. I said goodnight. I walked to my car. Then I opened my notes app. October 29th. 7:48 p.m. Gerald asked about trust company mail. Nervous. Diane redirected conversation immediately. He knew something was moving. He just didn't know how much. The smear campaign started on a Wednesday. I woke up to 11 text messages from relatives I hadn't spoken to in months. Aunt Carol, Gerald's sister. "Stella, I'm hearing some troubling things. Your father is heartbroken." Uncle Roy. "Family shouldn't sue family. Whatever this is, you need to drop it." A cousin I'd met twice. "Diane says you're going through something. We're praying for you. Praying for me." That's the phrase people use when they've decided you're the problem and they want you to know it without getting their hands dirty. I scrolled through the group chat Gerald's family used for holidays and birthdays. Diane had posted a message at 9 p.m. the night before, a paragraph and a half, perfectly punctuated, dripping with rehearsed anguish. "As many of you know, Stella has been going through a difficult time since the earthquake. Unfortunately, she is now making false accusations against Gerald and me regarding family finances. We are devastated. We have done nothing but love and support her for 24 years, and this is how she repays us. Please keep our family in your thoughts." 63 heart reactions, 22 comments. Not one person asked for my side. Then Gerald called. No more pot roast voice, cold. "I don't know what you're doing, Stella, but you need to stop. This is family business. You're embarrassing yourself." I said nothing. "Are you listening to me?" "I'm listening." "Then fix this." I hung up. Megan posted on Facebook that evening. Public. When someone bites the hand that feeds them. Prayers for my parents who've done nothing but love unconditionally. 47 likes within the hour. I screenshotted everything. Every message, every comment, every timestamp. I forwarded them to Nathan in a single email with one line, "For the file." I didn't defend myself in the group chat. A defense implies there's a trial of opinion. I wasn't interested in opinions. I was interested in evidence. Nathan called that night. His voice had an edge I hadn't heard before. "Forensic report is in. It's confirmed. Signatures are forged. Are you ready to file?" I sat in Nathan's office at 8:30 the next morning and signed my name, my real name, the one nobody had to forge, on every document he put in front of me. The probate court petition was 32 pages. It read like a medical chart for a dying family, clinical, precise, and devastating. Breach of fiduciary duty by trustee Gerald A. Whitmore. Fraudulent transfer of trust real property at 412 Birchwood Street. Unauthorized distribution of $210,000 in trust funds. Demand for full restitution, plus accrued interest. Removal of Gerald as trustee and appointment of an independent successor. Attached. The trust deed, the forged distribution authorization, the forged quitclaim deed, Dr. Sims's forensic report, and 22 pages of property records. Separately, Nathan filed a criminal referral with the Caldwell County District Attorney's Office. Forgery under California Penal Code Section 470, notary fraud, and a flag for elder financial exploitation. Because Edith Prescott had been systematically cut off from her granddaughter while her trust assets were looted. And from Tucson, overnight, FedEx delivered the final piece. Grandma Edith's sworn declaration, notarized at Sunridge Senior Community, 6 pages of her clear, firm handwriting converted to typed text and signed with a hand that didn't shake. She stated she had established the trust, never authorized any distribution, never signed any transfer documents, and had been told by Gerald that Stella did not wish to have contact, a claim she now knew to be false, evidenced by 22 Christmas letters returned in Gerald's handwriting. Nathan filed everything with the court that afternoon. Then he prepared the certified demand letter, 14-day response deadline, addressed to Gerald and Diane Whitmore at their current residence. "Once this is served," Nathan said, "there's no taking it back." I looked at the stack of documents on his desk. 9 years of theft, 22 years of lies. One 5-year-old girl told there was no room for her. I wasn't the one who started this. I'm just the one finishing it. The certified demand letter was delivered on a Monday at 11:47 a.m. I know the exact time because USPS tracking updated on my phone while I was starting an IV on a 60-year-old man with chest pains. I glanced at the notification. Delivered. Signed by G. Whitmore, and went back to my patient. The ER doesn't pause for family implosions. Gerald called at 6:32 that evening. I was buckling Lily into her car seat outside Rachel's apartment. I answered on speaker by accident, then quickly took it off. His voice was different. Not the patriarch voice, not the pot roast voice. Something I'd never heard from him before, the voice of a man reading a document he can't make disappear. "Stella, what is this? What have you done? You have 14 days to respond through your attorney. I have nothing else to say to you." "This is insane. I'm your father. You can't—" Diane is hysterical. She's— In the background, Diane. Not the musical church picnic voice now. High, shredded, and beneath that, Megan crying. "That trust was family money, Stella. I managed it for everyone's benefit." I caught that. I managed it. Not I didn't do it. Not there's been a mistake. He managed it. Past tense. Admission wrapped in justification. "You managed it into your down payment. 14 days, Dad." I hung up. He called back. 4 times in 20 minutes. I let each one ring through to voicemail. I didn't listen to any of them. I saved them. Rachel was waiting at the door. She looked at my face and handed me a mug of chamomile without a word. "How do you feel?" I sat on her couch. Lily was inside, drawing at the table again. Another house. More windows this time. More hearts on the roof. Like I should have done this years ago. Diane did not go quietly. I didn't expect her to. Quiet isn't in the playbook of someone who's spent 24 years controlling a family's narrative with sweet smiles and strategic phone calls. The escalation came in 3 waves. Wave 1, the extended family. Diane called my mother's sister, Aunt June, who lived in Oregon and hadn't spoken to Gerald in years. Told her I was fabricating allegations about a trust that never existed, and that I was emotionally unstable since the earthquake. Aunt June, to her credit, called me and asked for my side. I told her to call Grandma Edith. Wave 2, social media. Diane posted a 12-paragraph essay on Facebook. Public. I won't quote the whole thing, but the opening line was, "For 24 years I have tried to love a child who was not my own, and today my heart is shattered." 214 reactions. Comments full of prayer hands and crying emojis. A woman I'd never met called me ungrateful in the thread. Wave 3, Gerald's email. It arrived at 11 p.m., sent from his personal account to mine. "If you don't drop this, I will make sure everyone knows what kind of mother you are, leaving your child with strangers after an earthquake instead of coming to family. Think about what you're teaching Lily. Leaving my child with strangers." He meant Rachel. The woman who opened her door without conditions while he put conditions on a 5-year-old. And he was threatening to use my motherhood against me, the same man who didn't hold Lily when she was born. I forwarded the email to Nathan with one line. Add this to the file. Nathan's response came in 4 minutes. Retaliation. Potential witness intimidation. I'm supplementing the petition. This helps us, not them. I turned off my phone. Lily was asleep, biscuit under her chin. I watched her breathe for a long time. Teaching Lily? I was teaching her that nobody gets to steal your future and call it love. Grandma Edith landed at Caldwell Regional Airport on a Friday afternoon, 3 weeks before the court hearing. Southwest Airlines, 1 carry-on, orthopedic shoes, and a spine made of rebar. I spotted her at baggage claim before she saw me. She was smaller than I remembered, her shoulders narrower, her hair white where it used to be silver, but she stood the way she always had. Straight-backed, chin up, like a woman who'd buried a daughter and survived it and wasn't about to be bent by anything less. When she saw me, she stopped walking. Her hand came up to her mouth. And then she opened her arms, and I walked into them. And for a few seconds I was 8 years old again, standing in a lavender-scented kitchen on Birchwood Street, and nobody had lied to me yet. We drove to Rachel's house. Lily was in the living room, wearing a tutu over her jeans, arranging biscuit on a pillow throne. She looked up when we walked in, at this small, white-haired woman she'd never seen before. Grandma Edith knelt down, slowly, one knee at a time. Hello, sweet girl. I'm your great-grandma Edith. I've been waiting a very long time to meet you. Lily studied her face with that 5-year-old seriousness that holds nothing back. Do you like butterflies? She asked. Mama cuts my sandwiches into butterflies. I love butterflies. Lily took her hand and led her to the kitchen table to see the drawings. Grandma Edith looked at each one as if they were hanging in a gallery. When she got to the one labeled Our House, she looked at me over Lily's head. Her eyes were wet. She nodded once. That night, after Lily was asleep, Grandma Edith placed a small cardboard box on Rachel's kitchen table. Inside, 22 envelopes. Each one addressed to me, each one stamped return to sender in handwriting I recognized immediately. Gerald's handwriting, 22 Christmases, every single one sent back. I kept writing, she said quietly, because I knew one day, one letter would find you. 22 letters. 22 Christmases. She never stopped. And I spent every single one of those years believing she'd forgotten me, because that's what Gerald told me, and I had no reason not to believe my own father. But here's what I can't stop thinking. How many people out there tried to love us, and someone made sure the message never arrived? Do you think there's someone who tried to reach you, and somebody stood in the way? Because I almost missed mine, by 22 years. Gerald's 14-day deadline expired on a Wednesday at 5 p.m. On day 10, his attorney, a man named Dennis Pratchett, who appeared to handle mostly traffic citations and small claims disputes, had sent a 2-page letter to Nathan requesting a 30-day extension and stating, in language that even I could tell was weak, that trust distributions were authorized by implied family consent and conducted in the best interest of all parties. No documentation attached, no signed authorization from me, no explanation of why implied family consent overrides a beneficiary's legal rights. Just words, and not enough of them. Nathan's assessment was 3 sentences. The response lacks any substantive defense. There's no evidence of authorization. They're stalling because they don't have a case. Day 14 came and went, with no settlement offer, no real counter-argument, no acknowledgement of the forged signatures, nothing. Nathan filed a motion for an expedited hearing, citing the forensic evidence, the sworn declaration, and the pattern of retaliation. The probate court granted it. Hearing date: 3 weeks out, a Tuesday in November. On day 15, Gerald called me one last time. His voice had changed again. Gone was the threat from the email. Gone was the patriarch bark. What was left sounded hollowed out. Stella, please, can we just talk? I'm your father. We can work this out. Don't humiliate me in court. I let the word land. Humiliate. As if humiliation was something being done to him, and not something he'd done to a 5-year-old standing in a driveway with a stuffed bear. You had 14 days to work this out, Dad. You chose not to. I'll see you at the hearing. I hung up. Nathan called 20 minutes later. One more thing. Megan's birthday party is this Saturday, and the process server confirmed. The hearing summons needs to be personally served on Gerald, at his residence, by a sheriff's deputy. Saturday. The birthday party. 30 guests. It's the only confirmed time he'll be home, Nathan said. The court requires personal service. I didn't plan it this way, but I didn't stop it either. I wasn't there. I want to be clear about that. I was at Rachel's apartment with Lily that Saturday afternoon, making butterfly sandwiches and watching her teach Grandma Edith how to draw a proper unicorn. I didn't stand on the sidewalk watching. I didn't drive past. I didn't need to. Rachel's cousin knew someone who was at the party, and in a town like Caldwell, a sheriff's deputy pulling up to a birthday barbecue doesn't stay a secret for long. Here is what I was told. It was 2:15 p.m. The backyard was decorated with pink and gold balloons. 30 guests. Megan had just blown out her candles. Diane was carrying a sheet cake through the living room when the doorbell rang. Gerald answered it, still holding a paper plate, expecting a late arrival. A Caldwell County Sheriff's deputy stood on the porch. Tan uniform, clipboard. Gerald Whitmore? Yes. You've been served. He handed Gerald a large envelope. Gerald took it automatically, the way you take something from a stranger before your brain catches up. The deputy tipped his hat, turned, and walked back to his cruiser. Gerald stood in the doorway. Diane came up behind him, cake still in her hands. Who was that? Gerald. Gerald, what is... He opened the envelope. Probate court hearing summons. Full petition packet. Forensic report summary. And attached to the back, 6 pages in a clear, firm voice. Grandma Edith's sworn declaration. Diane saw the name. Edith Prescott. The cake plate tilted. She grabbed the doorframe. She's still... 30 people were watching. In the backyard, through the sliding glass door, over half-eaten slices of birthday cake. Nobody was singing anymore. Gerald looked up from the papers. According to Rachel's cousin, his face didn't show anger or surprise. It showed the expression of a man who has just realized that the ground beneath his house was never his to stand on. Probate court, Caldwell County. A Tuesday morning in November. Fluorescent lights. Wood grain laminate. The faint smell of floor polish and old paper. Not the kind of room you'd imagine for a reckoning. But then again, most reckonings don't look the way you expect. I sat at the petitioner's table beside Nathan. I wore my navy scrubs under a gray blazer because I'd come straight from a shift and because I wanted the judge to see exactly who I was, a woman who works for a living. Behind me, Grandma Edith sat in the first row, straight-backed, hands folded, 82 years old and radiating the kind of quiet authority that doesn't need volume. Across the aisle, Gerald in a rumpled suit, Dennis Pratchett flipping nervously through a folder that was visibly thinner than ours, and Diane in the row behind them. No smile today, no sweetie, no pastel cardigan. She looked gray. Nathan presented the case in under 20 minutes. Trust deed, 2004. Sole beneficiary, Stella Marie Prescott. Trustee, Gerald Whitmore. Trust distribution authorization, March 2019. Forged. Quitclaim deed, April 2019. Forged. Dr. Sims's forensic report. Signatures do not match known exemplars. Notary Janet Fry, Diane's colleague, notarized without the signatory present. Criminal referral filed. Then Grandma Edith took the stand. She didn't tremble. She didn't ramble. She spoke the way she'd always spoken to me, clearly, gently, and with absolutely no room for misunderstanding. I established the Prescott Family Trust in 2004 for one person, my granddaughter Stella. I never authorized any withdrawal. I never signed any transfer. I was told my granddaughter didn't want me in her life. I have 22 letters, returned in my son-in-law's handwriting, that prove otherwise. Dennis Pratchett attempted to argue implied family authorization. The judge cut him off mid-sentence. Fiduciary duty is not subject to implied consent, counselor. The trustee's obligations are explicit and documented. The judge looked at Gerald the way I've seen doctors look at patients who waited too long. Not angry. Just certain of the diagnosis. The judge issued the ruling from the bench that same afternoon. Expedited, he said, because the evidence left no ambiguity. I sat still and listened to a man in a black robe dismantle the architecture of a lie that had taken my father 22 years to build. First, Gerald A. Whitmore was immediately removed as trustee of the Prescott Family Trust. The court appointed an independent fiduciary, a licensed professional trustee with no connection to either party. Second, restitution. Gerald and Diane Whitmore were ordered to repay $210,000 in misappropriated trust principal, plus $38,000 in accrued interest, for a total of $248,000. Payment due within 90 days. Failure to comply would result in a court-ordered lien on their real property, meaning their house. Third, the 2019 quitclaim deed transferring 412 Birchwood Street was declared void. Since the property had already been sold and the proceeds used as a down payment on the Whitmore's current residence, equity tracing applied. In plain terms, if they couldn't produce $248,000 in 90 days, they'd have to sell the house or face forced sale through the lien. Fourth, the criminal referral to the district attorney was sustained. Gerald faced felony forgery charges under California Penal Code 470. Janet Fry, the notary, had already been summoned separately. Her notary commission revoked, a misdemeanor charge pending. Gerald didn't move when the judge finished. He sat in his chair with his hands flat on the table like a man trying to keep the room from spinning. Diane made a sound behind him. Not a word, just a sound, like air leaving a tire. Outside the courtroom, Grandma Edith took my hand. Her grip was small and firm and warm. Your mama would be proud, baby girl. $248,000. Not revenge, restitution. There's a difference. Revenge is about making someone hurt. Restitution is about getting back what's yours. 1 week after the ruling, Gerald called. I almost didn't answer. But something in me, the last remaining thread of the girl who used to ride in Grandma Edith's green Buick, picked up. He didn't sound like my father. He sounded like a man who'd been sitting in the same chair for 7 days, going over the math and watching it come out wrong every time. Stella, we have to sell the house. I said nothing. She's not coping. She won't eat. Megan's looking for apartments, but she's never paid rent in her life, and she doesn't... His voice cracked. She doesn't know how. I waited. Can you talk to the judge? Reduce the amount? For the kids' sake? Megan's kids? They're just children. They didn't... You told me there was no space for my child. I said it evenly, the way I deliver news in the ER. Clear, calm, no editorializing. In a house you bought with money meant for her. You forged my name. You lied to my grandmother for 22 years. You cut me off from the only person on my mother's side who wanted me, and now you're asking me to fix this for you. Silence. Long, heavy with the sound of someone who has run out of narrative. I won't make your life harder than the court already has, Dad. But I won't make it easier either. The trust will be repaid. That's not negotiable. One more beat of silence. Then, goodbye, Dad. I set the phone on the kitchen counter. I didn't slam it. I didn't cry. I just set it down the way you set down something you've been carrying too long and finally realize you're allowed to put down. That evening, Diane's Facebook went dark. Every post deleted. Megan's family dinner photos gone. The group chat that had buzzed with prayer hands and accusations fell silent, one by one, like lights going off in a house nobody could afford anymore. I didn't watch. I didn't check. I was done looking in that direction. 4 months later, the trust was repaid in full. Every dollar, every cent of interest. Gerald and Diane sold the house in 63 days, at a loss. I didn't ask where they went. I didn't need to know. With the trust restored and an independent trustee managing it properly for the first time, I put a down payment on a 2-bedroom cottage on Maplewood Lane, half a mile from the hospital, 3 blocks from Lily's new school. It had a small yard, a kitchen with actual counter space, and a front door that I painted red on the first Saturday we moved in. Lily stood in the driveway and pointed at it like she'd conjured it out of a crayon. "Mama, it's the door, from my drawing." "You designed it, baby. I just made it real." Grandma Edith moved back to California that winter. She rented a 1-bedroom apartment 10 minutes from us, close enough to walk when the weather was good, and it was good most days. Every Saturday morning, she and Lily baked cornbread in my kitchen. The house smelled like butter and warmth, and Lily learned to crack eggs without getting shell in the batter, and Grandma Edith hummed the same hymns she used to sing to me on Birchwood Street. We planted lavender along the front walk. Lily watered it every evening with a pink watering can, Biscuit wedged under her arm, talking to each plant like it was a friend she was catching up with. I started seeing a therapist. Not because I was broken, but because 22 years of carrying someone else's lies had left grooves in the way I thought about myself, and I wanted to smooth them out. I wanted to be the kind of steady that was real, not performed. In Lily's room, taped to the wall above her bed, was the original drawing. Our house, red door, 2 hearts on the roof. Next to it, a new one. Our real house, same red door. But now there were 3 people in front of it, me, Lily, and a small white-haired figure labeled in careful kindergarten letters, Great Grandma. The star nightlight still glowed by her pillow. Biscuit still sat on the bed. Some things you don't outgrow. You just finally give them the right home. I'm sitting on my front porch as I tell you this. It's a Sunday morning. The coffee's hot, the lavender's blooming, and through the kitchen window I can hear Lily giggling at something Grandma Edith said over cornbread batter. The kind of sound that fills a house the way sunlight fills a room, without trying, without asking permission, just because it belongs there. My father's criminal case is still making its way through the system. I don't follow it closely. Nathan sends updates when there's something I need to know. The forgery charge stands. Janet Fry's notary commission is permanently revoked. These are consequences, not punishments I designed. They're the natural weight of choices Gerald and Diane made long before I ever opened that box. Some of the relatives who sent me those prayer hands texts have reached out since. A few apologized. Most haven't. I'm okay with that. I didn't do this for their approval. I did it because my daughter asked me if she was too big, and the answer to that question couldn't stay inside a notes app forever. Gerald hasn't called again. Neither has Diane. Neither has Megan. The silence where their voices used to be doesn't feel empty. It feels like a room that's been cleared of furniture that was never mine, and now there's space to breathe. Lily asked me last week why our front door is red. I told her because she drew it that way, a long time ago, in a house that wasn't ours yet. She nodded like this made perfect sense. I knew it would come true, she said. 5-year-olds understand faith better than most adults. I didn't do this for revenge. I did it because my daughter deserved to know that when someone tells you there's no space for you, the answer isn't to make yourself smaller. It's to find out who's been taking up your space all along. And if you're out there, if your family ever made you feel like you were too much, you weren't. You were just in a house that was too small for the truth. I used to be afraid of silence in our apartment. Now, the silence in our house sounds different. It sounds like peace. It sounds like enough. That's my story. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. It means more than you know. If any part of this reached you, if you've ever had to build your own table because the one you were born into didn't have room for you, leave a comment. Tell me your story. I read every single one, and you are not alone in this. If you want to hear another story about a mother who refused to stay silent, check the link in the description. Subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves and the people who actually deserve a seat at your table. Today is your sister's birthday. We can't come, my mother said, 3 hours after I told her my husband and 2 children were dead. That sentence. 7 seconds of silence on the phone before she hung up. I stood in the hospital hallway, still wearing the scrubs I'd clocked in with that morning, and the world just stopped. My husband Jake, my daughter Lily, my son Noah, gone, and my mother chose a birthday cake over their caskets. But that phone call didn't break me, it freed me. Because 6 months later, one newspaper headline about what I did with the $5 million Jake secretly left behind sent my entire family into a panic they never recovered from. What my family doesn't know yet is that their absence at that funeral didn't just lose them a daughter, it lost them everything. Before I go on, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with this story. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always love knowing who's listening. My name is Bianca Myers. I'm 34 years old, and I'm an ER nurse in Hartford, Connecticut. Now, let me take you back to a November evening, the night I lost everything and found out exactly who my family really was. Before that night, my life was small and good. Not flashy. Not Instagram-worthy. Just good. Jake and I lived in a 3-bedroom colonial off Route 4 in Farmington, about 20 minutes outside Hartford. He was a software engineer at a mid-sized tech firm in Glastonbury. I worked the night shift at Mercy General. We'd bought the house 2 years earlier with a modest down payment and a lot of optimism. Lily was 6. She had Jake's brown eyes and my stubbornness. Noah was 4. He carried a stuffed bear named Captain everywhere. The grocery store, the bathtub, church on Sundays. We met because Jake sliced his hand open helping a coworker move a desk. He walked into my ER at 2 a.m, bleeding through a dish towel, and asked me if the stitches would leave a cool scar. I told him no. He asked for my number anyway. That was Jake. Steady. Warm. The kind of man who remembered your coffee order after hearing it once. In the Ashford family, my birth family, I was the invisible one. The eldest daughter who never caused trouble, never asked for money, never needed rescuing. I paid my own way through nursing school. I planned my own wedding. A small ceremony at the courthouse because my parents said they didn't have the budget for anything bigger. They had the budget for Megan's Sweet 16 the same year. 70 guests. A DJ. Every holiday, I cooked. I cleaned. I bought the gifts. My mother Linda never once asked how my shifts were going or whether Lily had started kindergarten. Her calls always opened the same way. What are you bringing for dinner? Jake saw it before I did. One Thanksgiving, loading the car after I'd spent 9 hours in my mother's kitchen, he turned to me and said, "Your family treats you like the help, Bianca." I said what I always said. They're just like that. It's fine. It wasn't fine. But I didn't know that yet. And Jake, quiet, steady Jake, had already started planning for the day I'd finally figure it out. November 14th, a Tuesday. I was halfway through my shift when the charge nurse touched my shoulder. "Bianca, break room. Now." I knew that voice. I'd used it myself. The careful, controlled tone we reserved for delivering the worst news a person could hear. I followed her down the corridor. My legs already knew. 2 Connecticut state troopers stood inside. One held his hat against his chest. The other couldn't look at me. "Mrs. Myers, there's been an accident on Route 44. Jake had picked Lily and Noah up from swim lessons at the YMCA. They were 7 minutes from home. A man named Gerald Fenton, 41 years old, blood alcohol level twice the legal limit, ran a red light at 53 miles per hour and hit the passenger side of our Honda Accord. Jake died at the scene. Lily died in the ambulance. Noah made it to Mercy General, my hospital, my ER. But I was in the break room when they brought him in. He was gone before I reached the trauma bay. 3 minutes. That's what the trooper said. 3 minutes between my break room and Noah's last breath. I don't remember sitting down. I remember the floor, the cold linoleum, the fluorescent light buzzing above me like it didn't know the world had just ended. My coworker Angela knelt beside me. She didn't say anything. She just held my hand. At some point, I don't know how much later. I picked up my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely unlock the screen. I called my mother. It was instinct, primal. When everything falls apart, you call your mom. The phone rang 4 times. I heard music in the background. Laughter. Megan's voice singing off-key. Then my mother picked up. Hello? Bianca? Make it quick. We're about to cut the cake. Mom. My voice cracked on the word. Jake is dead. Lily and Noah are dead. I need you. Silence. 3 seconds. 5. I could hear the party behind her. Someone clinking a glass. A child laughing. Then my mother's voice dropped low, the way it always did when she didn't want guests to overhear something unpleasant. Bianca, I hear you. That's terrible. But today is Megan's birthday. We have 30 people here. We can't just leave. I pressed the phone harder against my ear, sure I'd misheard. Mom, my husband, my children, they're gone. I know, honey. But what do you want me to do right now? Megan will be devastated if we leave her party. Call your friend. The one from the hospital. She'll help you. I'll call you tomorrow, okay? She hung up. 9:47 p.m. 3 minutes and 12 seconds. I know, because I stared at the call log for an hour afterward. I called my father next. Donald Ashford picked up on the second ring. I could hear him stepping outside. The creak of the screen door. Wind against the receiver. Dad, did Mom tell you? A pause. Then, yeah, kiddo. She mentioned it. We'll come see you next week. Hang in there. He hung up too. 1 call left. Megan. It went to voicemail. I left a message I don't remember recording. 2 hours later, she texted back. Mom told me. So sorry, call me TMRW. I sat on that hospital floor until my shift supervisor found me at midnight. 3 calls, 3 chances for my family to show up, 3 doors slammed shut. And that's the moment I understood something I'd spent 34 years pretending wasn't true. My family didn't forget me. They didn't get confused or overwhelmed. They looked at the worst night of my life, weighed it against a sheet cake and some balloons, and made their choice. The funeral was on a Saturday, November 18th. It rained. A cold, steady Connecticut rain that turned the cemetery grass into mud. Pastor Grace Bennett from Greenfield Community Church presided. She'd baptized both Lily and Noah. When I told her what happened, she drove to my house at 6 a.m. with coffee and a binder full of hymn options. She didn't ask about my family. She just said, "Tell me what they loved." Lily loved butterflies. Noah loved his bear captain. Jake loved Bruce Springsteen, so we played If I Should Fall Behind while the rain drummed against the tent canopy, and I stood in front of 3 caskets, 1 full-sized, 2 impossibly small, and tried to say goodbye to my entire world. My co-workers came. Angela, Denise, Marcus, Dr. Patel from the ER. They wore black scrubs under their coats, because they'd come straight off shift. Tom Whitfield, Jake's college roommate, flew in from Boston on a red-eye. He stood beside me the whole service, holding an umbrella over my head even though his own shoulder was soaked. I put Captain inside Noah's casket. I clipped Lily's butterfly barrette onto her pillow. I touched Jake's hand one last time and whispered something I'll keep between us. Then I looked at the front row. The chairs reserved for family. Empty. All 4 of them. White folding chairs beating with rainwater. Not one Ashford. Pastor Grace followed my gaze. She reached over and squeezed my wrist. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. After the burial, Tom helped me carry flowers to the car. He stopped at the driver's side and looked at me with an expression I can still picture. Confusion mixed with something sharper. Bianca, where's your family? I shook my head. That was all I could manage. Tom stared at me for a long time, rain running down his face. He nodded once. He didn't ask again. But I could tell. He was filing it away. Somewhere behind those journalist eyes, a clock had started ticking. 1 week after the funeral, my mother called. I almost didn't pick up. But 34 years of conditioning is hard to override in 7 days. My thumb hit the green button before my brain caught up. Bianca, Thanksgiving is next Thursday. Are you bringing the casserole? Megan wants the green bean one. I held the phone away from my ear and stared at it, like the screen might rearrange itself into something that made sense. 3 caskets, 7 days, and my mother was asking about casserole. Mom, I just buried my family. I know, honey. That's exactly why you need to be around people. Come for Thanksgiving. It'll be good for you. Sitting alone in that house isn't healthy. Her voice was warm, concerned, reasonable. If you'd overheard the conversation without context, you'd think she was a caring mother reaching out to her grieving daughter. That was the thing about Linda Ashford. She always sounded like the good guy. But I heard the machinery underneath. Come to Thanksgiving. Bring the casserole. Sit in the kitchen. Serve the family. Smile. Perform. And by dessert, the funeral would become an inconvenience that happened last month, filed away between Megan's dental bills and Dad's garage project. I can't do that, Mom. Don't be dramatic. We're your family. I hung up. No explanation, no argument. First time in my life. She called back 4 times. I let it ring. She left a voicemail. Bianca, this is ridiculous. You cannot just shut people out. Call me back. I stood in my kitchen, Jake's coffee mug still on the counter, Lily's drawing of a purple horse still on the fridge, Noah's booster seat still at the table. And I understood something with absolute clarity. If I went back to that Thanksgiving table, I would never leave it. I would spend the rest of my life serving people who couldn't be bothered to attend my children's funeral. That wasn't going to happen. Not anymore. I typed one message into the family group chat. No capitals, no exclamation points. Just, I need space. Please don't contact me. I'll reach out when I'm ready. Then I set the phone down and waited. Linda's response came in 90 seconds. This is unacceptable. You do not get to just disappear on this family. Donald, 2 minutes later. Your mother is very upset. Please call her. Megan, an hour later. Wow, okay. Guess I don't have a sister anymore. Cool. I blocked all 3 numbers. I muted the group chat. I sat on the edge of my bed in a house that still smelled like Jake's aftershave and let the silence settle around me like snow. The next morning, I called a therapist. Dr. Ellen Shaw had an office on Asylum Avenue, an unfortunate street name for a grief counselor, but she came highly recommended. Small room, 2 armchairs, a box of tissues on every surface. In our first session, she asked a question that knocked the wind out of me. When was the last time your family showed up for you? I opened my mouth, closed it, thought about birthdays, graduations, Lily's first steps, Noah's first word. Thought about who was there and who wasn't. The answer sat in my chest like a stone. Silence. Dr. Shaw nodded. She didn't push. We'll start there, she said. I went back to work the following week. My colleagues covered for me without being asked. Angela swapped shifts. Marcus handled my charts. Dr. Patel assigned me to lower acuity cases until I found my footing. One night, a DUI victim came in. 19 years old. Shattered pelvis. I made it to the supply closet before my knees buckled. Tom Whitfield called that same week. Just checking in. How are you, really? I'm surviving, I told him. That's enough for now. Jake's lawyer called me, Tom said. Robert Calloway. He needs to talk to you about some paperwork Jake filed. You know him? I didn't. I didn't know Jake had a lawyer at all. Robert Calloway's office was on the 2nd floor of a brick building in West Hartford, above a bakery that made the whole stairwell smell like sourdough. He was a tall man, mid-50s, with reading glasses and a handshake that felt like a promise. Jake and I went to Yukon together, he said, settling into his chair. We stayed in touch. He came to see me about 8 months before the accident. 8 months. That would have been March. Around the time Jake had started locking his home office door for an hour every Sunday evening, I'd assumed he was working. Robert slid a manila envelope across the desk. Jake purchased a term life insurance policy 8 months before the accident. $5 million. You are the sole beneficiary. He paused. Because the policy was less than 2 years old, the carrier did a routine investigation. It took about 4 months, but everything checked out. Jake was in perfect health when he applied. The accident was caused entirely by the other driver, and there was no question about the claim. The funds are ready for disbursement. I didn't move. The number didn't register at first. It was too large, too foreign, like hearing a word in a language I didn't speak. 5 million? He was making good money at the firm. Excellent health, non-smoker, 35 years old. The premiums were manageable. He set it up specifically because... Robert paused, choosing his words. He told me about your family situation, Bianca, not in detail. He just said, if something happens to me, she'll be alone. Her family won't help her. I need to know she's covered. There was a letter inside the envelope. Jake's handwriting. The left-handed scrawl I used to tease him about. I didn't read it in the office. That felt too public. But Robert told me the last line. He said Jake had asked him to, if I seemed hesitant. You always take care of everyone else. Let me take care of you this one last time. I pressed the envelope against my chest and cried. Not the hollow, shocked crying from the hospital floor. This was different. This was warm. This was the grief of being loved so completely by someone who knew, who always knew, that the people who should have protected me never would. Jake couldn't save himself, but he'd reached across death to save me. I didn't touch the money for weeks after it cleared. It sat in an escrow account while I stared at the ceiling every night, trying to figure out what a person does with $5 million that arrived because her family died. Spending it on myself felt wrong. Saving it felt hollow. The number was a ghost, Jake-shaped, Lily-shaped, Noah-shaped, and I couldn't look at it without seeing their faces. Dr. Shaw was the one who cracked it open. What would Jake want you to do with this? I thought about that for a long time. I thought about the 19-year-old DUI victim in my ER, the one whose mother sat in the waiting room for 6 hours, in the same clothes she'd been wearing when the police showed up at her door. I thought about the nights after Jake's funeral when I couldn't sleep and Googled financial help for families of drunk driving victims and found almost nothing in Connecticut. I thought about sitting alone in that cemetery in the rain. No family should face what I faced alone, I said. The idea took shape slowly, then all at once. A foundation. Not a memorial plaque or a bench in a park. Something that worked. That paid for funerals when families couldn't afford them, that covered rent for the first 3 months of shock, that connected survivors with grief counselors who actually returned their calls. I phoned Robert that evening. I want to start a foundation, in Jake's name, and Lily's, and Noah's. I'll set it up, he said. 501c3. We'll do this right. I kept a portion for myself. Enough to pay off the mortgage, build an emergency fund, breathe without panic. Jake would have insisted. He was practical like that, and I was an ER nurse. I knew how to triage. What I didn't know was that this decision, quiet, private, made in a therapist's office on a Tuesday afternoon, would eventually land on the front page of a newspaper. And that front page would reach a house in Glastonbury, where a woman named Linda Ashford was about to discover that the daughter she'd dismissed had become someone she couldn't ignore. While I built the foundation, the truth was building something of its own. In a town like Farmington, nothing stays secret. People talk at the diner. They talk after church. They talk in the checkout line at Stop and Shop. And the question that kept circling back, over coffee, over casseroles, over choir practice at Greenfield Community Church, was a simple one. Where was Bianca's family? Pastor Grace never said a word publicly. She didn't need to. She'd presided over a funeral with 3 caskets and an empty front row. People noticed. People remembered. It started small. Linda was at the church potluck in January when Barbara Hensley from the Women's Fellowship asked, "How's Bianca doing? We heard about the accident. Just awful." My mother smiled her church smile, the one that looked like concern but cost her nothing. "She's doing fine. Just needs some time." Then Carol Dunning, our neighbor of 22 years, the woman who'd watched me grow up, asked the question Linda wasn't ready for. "Were you at the funeral, Linda?" "I didn't see you." "We had a family commitment that day." Carol looked at her. Didn't blink, didn't nod, just looked. Then she picked up her plate and moved to another table. Megan felt it too. Her friends started asking about me. She gave them the script. My sister is being dramatic. She cut us off for no reason. It worked. Until someone asked the follow-up. Wait, you didn't go to the funeral? Megan had no good answer for that. My mother called my father into the kitchen one evening. I know this because Donald told me later, in a text message I wasn't expecting. Linda stood at the counter, arms crossed, jaw tight. We need to get Bianca back before this gets worse. People are talking. Not, we need to apologize. Not, we were wrong. Not, our grandchildren are dead and we didn't say goodbye. People are talking. That was what mattered. The image, the story, the performance. Linda Ashford had spent 61 years directing the family narrative, and for the first time, someone else was holding the pen. By March, 4 months after the accident, the foundation paperwork was nearly complete. Robert had filed the 501c3 application. I'd drafted a mission statement at my kitchen table at 2 a.m, still in scrubs, with Jake's letter propped against the salt shaker. I had a name, the Myers Family Foundation. I also had a purpose, and for the first time since November, I woke up in the morning with a reason to get out of bed that wasn't just obligation. Meanwhile, my mother was busy too. Linda had a network. Church friends, neighborhood acquaintances, a cousin in Glastonbury, who heard things from a paralegal, who knew a financial planner. Word traveled the way it always does in small-town Connecticut. Slowly, then everywhere, at once. Someone mentioned at a fellowship dinner that Bianca Myers had received a significant insurance payout. Someone else mentioned the word foundation. By the time the information reached Linda, it had been rounded up and polished into something irresistible. Jake left her money, Linda told my father. Insurance. A lot. How much? Donald asked. Enough that she's starting some kind of charity. I can picture my father in that moment, sitting in his recliner, beer on the armrest, staring at the muted television, doing the math. Not the emotional math, the financial math. Maybe we should call her, he said. But Linda was smarter than a phone call. She knew I'd blocked them. So she went to Pastor Grace instead. Pastor, my daughter is grieving and she's pushing everyone away. We're worried about her. Could you help us bring the family together? Maybe a prayer meeting? Something gentle. Pastor Grace listened. She nodded slowly. She said, I'll think about it, Linda. But later that night, alone in her study, Grace Bennett sat with the memory of 3 caskets and 4 empty chairs, and she thought very carefully about what gentle meant to a woman like Linda Ashford. 2 weeks later, Tom Whitfield called. Bianca, I pitched a feature to my editor about DUI victim advocacy in Connecticut. I disclosed that Jake was a friend. She approved it on the condition that I focus on the systemic angle, not just your story. But your foundation is the centerpiece. DUI victim advocacy in Connecticut. What exists? What doesn't? Where the gaps are? Your foundation fits perfectly. Would you be open to an interview? I hesitated. Publicity wasn't something I'd ever sought. I was a night shift ER nurse. My idea of public speaking was reading triage notes to an attending at 3 a.m. But Tom wasn't asking me to perform. He was asking me to tell the truth. And the truth was the only thing I had left that still felt solid. Okay, I said. But I'm not doing this for attention. I know. That's why it matters. We met at a coffee shop near the hospital. Tom set up a recorder between our mugs and let me talk. I told him about Jake, the stitches, the scar question, the Sunday evenings behind a locked office door that turned out to be insurance research. I told him about Lily's butterflies and Noah's bear. I told him about the foundation and the 5 families we'd already identified for our first round of support. Then he asked the question, You organized the funeral alone? I stirred my coffee. Jake's friends were there, my coworkers, my pastor. Tom waited. He was good at silence. My birth family wasn't. He didn't press. He just wrote it down. Before he left, he asked if he could include that detail. I thought about it for exactly one breath. You can say what's true. I won't ask you to hide anything, but I won't add drama either. At the same time, and I only learned this later, Linda was on the phone with Megan. Her voice had the brittle urgency of a woman watching a story slip through her fingers. We need to talk to Bianca, before other people start telling our story for us. Megan snorted. What story? We didn't do anything wrong. Exactly, Linda said, and we need to make sure people know that. Tom told me the piece would take a few more weeks. He needed to interview other families and fact-check with Mad before the editors would run it. The Ashfords had no idea it was coming. Linda worked fast. Within a week, she had Pastor Grace cornered after Sunday service. Pastor, I've been praying about this. Could we do a small reconciliation meeting? Just family and a few close friends. Nothing formal. Just prayer and conversation. Pastor Grace agreed, reluctantly. But she set one condition. I will not pressure Bianca, Linda. This has to be her choice. Of course, my mother said. Of course. Then Linda went home and called every woman in her contact list. By Saturday, what was supposed to be a small family meeting had swelled to 20 people. The entire Women's Fellowship Board, 3 couples from the neighborhood, and Carol Dunning, who Linda specifically invited because Carol's earlier question at the potluck still burned. Linda wanted an audience. She wanted witnesses who would see her cry, see her reach out, and conclude that Bianca was the problem. The invitation reached me through a text from a number I didn't recognize. Linda had borrowed a friend's phone. Bianca, Pastor Grace is organizing a family prayer meeting this Sunday. Everyone in church wants to see you. Please come. For your children's memory. For your children's memory. She used their names like currency. I called Pastor Grace immediately. Did you set this up? Grace sighed. Your mother asked for a small gathering. I agreed to that. But I just heard she's invited half the congregation. Bianca, I'm concerned about what she's planning. I sat in my car in the hospital parking lot and thought about it for a long time. The old Bianca would have stayed home, would have protected herself. But the old Bianca also would have brought a casserole to Thanksgiving 3 weeks after burying her children. I wasn't her anymore. I'll be there, I told Grace. Not for my mother. For me. Grace was quiet for a moment, then. I want you to know something. I told your mother I was at the funeral that day. She didn't blink, Bianca. She didn't even blink. Sunday. 2 o'clock. The fellowship room at Greenfield Community Church. I walked in and counted. 22 people. Chairs arranged in a loose semicircle. Coffee urn on a folding table. A plate of cookies someone had brought because in Connecticut, even ambushes come with baked goods. My mother sat in the front row. She wore her lavender church dress, the one she reserved for occasions when she wanted to look soft. Her eyes were already red. A white handkerchief rested on her lap, pre-positioned. My father sat beside her, shoulders squared, staring at a spot on the carpet. Megan stood near the back wall, arms crossed, jaw tight. She looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. Linda stood up the moment I took a seat. She didn't wait for Pastor Grace to open the meeting. Thank you all for being here. Her voice trembled beautifully. As many of you know, our family has been through a terrible time. My daughter Bianca lost her husband and children in a horrible accident. We've tried to be there for her, but she's pushed us away. She dabbed the handkerchief under one eye. We're heartbroken. All we want is our daughter back. Murmurs, nods, sympathetic glances aimed at Linda. She was good at this. The trembling chin, the measured pauses, the way she made grief look like something that was happening to her. Barbara Hensley leaned forward. Bianca, your mother loves you. Family is everything. I sat still, hands on my knees, watching. Then Megan, from the back of the room, added her voice. I've texted her so many times, she won't even answer. I lost a brother-in-law, and a niece and nephew too. You know. 22 heads turned to me. 22 faces waiting for me to apologize, to cry, to fold. I stood up. The room went quiet. May I speak? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. My husband and 2 children died on November 14th. I called my mother from the hospital that night. She told me she couldn't come because it was Megan's birthday party. The room was already still, but now it hardened. Like the air itself had turned to glass. She said, "We can't just leave. We'll visit next week." Linda opened her mouth. "That's not—" "I have the call log, Mom. 9:47 p.m., 3 minutes and 12 seconds. She closed her mouth. "My father told me to hang in there. My sister texted me a crying emoji and said, 'Call me tomorrow.' Nobody came to the hospital. Nobody came the next day. Nobody came to the funeral." I looked at Pastor Grace. She met my eyes and nodded once. "Pastor Grace was there, she can confirm." Grace's voice was steady. The family seats were empty. Someone in the second row inhaled sharply. Carol Dunning put her hand over her mouth. Barbara Hensley set her coffee down and didn't pick it up again. Linda's composure cracked. Just a fracture, but visible. "We had commitments. We couldn't just—" "Your commitment was a birthday party." I kept my voice level. "My commitment was burying my 6-year-old daughter." Nobody spoke. The cookies sat untouched. The coffee urn hissed softly in the corner. "I didn't come here to argue," I said. "I came because you asked. Now you've heard both sides." I walked out. I didn't slam the door. I closed it the way you close a chapter. Quietly, completely. In the parking lot, footsteps behind me. Megan. Out of breath. "Bianca, wait. That's not fair. You're making us look terrible." I unlocked my car. "I didn't make you look like anything, Megan. I told them what happened." She stood in the gravel lot with her arms at her sides, and for the first time she had nothing to say. I pulled out of the lot, and in my rearview mirror I could see her still standing there, smaller than I'd ever seen her. 3 weeks after the church meeting, Tom's article finally went live. He'd spent the extra time interviewing other DUI families and MAD representatives, turning what started as my story into something bigger. The headline sat at the top of the Hartford Courant's Sunday Features section. "After losing her family to a drunk driver, Hartford nurse turns grief into a mission." Tom wrote about Jake, the engineer who quietly planned for the worst because he'd watched a coworker's family fall apart after a sudden death. He wrote about Lily, who wanted to be a marine biologist, and Noah, who introduced Captain the Bear to every new person he met. He wrote about Bianca's mission, how she'd already personally helped 5 families affected by drunk driving accidents, covering funeral costs, rent, and counseling out of her own pocket, while the formal 501c3 application for the Myers Family Foundation worked its way through the IRS. The foundation wasn't yet official, but the work was already real. And in the 7th paragraph, one sentence. Myers organized the funeral with the help of coworkers and friends. Her birth family, she said, was unable to attend. That was it. No names, no accusations, no adjectives. Just 8 words that landed like a dropped piano. The article was shared 4,000 times in the first 48 hours. NBC Connecticut called on Monday. MAD's Connecticut chapter emailed on Tuesday. A producer from a Hartford radio station left a voicemail asking if I'd come on air. My inbox filled with messages from strangers. A woman in Bridgeport. "My son was killed by a drunk driver last year. I couldn't afford his burial. Thank you for what you're doing." A retired firefighter in New Haven. "Your husband was a good man. You're honoring him right." I sat at my kitchen table reading those messages until 3 in the morning. The house was quiet. Jake's mug was still on the counter. I hadn't moved it, and I wasn't going to. Lily's purple horse drawing was still on the fridge. Noah's booster seat was still at the table. I wasn't looking for attention. I wasn't trying to expose anyone. I was just building something so that 3 lives wouldn't be reduced to a police report number, but attention has its own plans. And 30 miles away, in a house in Glastonbury, a woman named Linda Ashford was about to open her phone to a text message from her neighbor Carol that read, "Linda, is this your Bianca?" Linda read the article 3 times. I know because Megan told me later, during one of her visits I didn't ask for, That their mother sat at the kitchen table with her reading glasses on and her lips pressed into a white line, scrolling, scrolling, scrolling. Then the phone calls started. Barbara Hensley called first. Polite. Careful. Linda, I saw the article about Bianca. That poor girl. I had no idea about the foundation. What a beautiful thing she's doing. Pause. It mentioned the funeral, that the family wasn't there. It's complicated, Barbara. Of course. Click. Her sister in Florida called next, Aunt Rachel, less polite. Linda, tell me you were at that funeral. It's complicated. Silence, a long one. Then, what was complicated about it? At church that Sunday, the seats around Linda thinned. Nobody confronted her. Nobody had to. The architecture of a small-town social circle doesn't require confrontation. It just requires a slight turning of chairs, a half-second delay before someone says hello, an invitation that doesn't arrive. Pastor Grace didn't mention the article from the pulpit. She preached about presence, about showing up, about the difference between saying you love someone and proving it. Linda sat through the sermon with her back straight and her hands folded, and didn't stay for coffee afterward. Megan got it worse online. A mutual friend posted the article with a caption, "This is the kind of person the world needs." Someone commented, "Imagine choosing a birthday party over your niece and nephew's funeral." Megan's name wasn't in the article, but in a small town, it didn't need to be. She deactivated her Facebook by Wednesday. Donald retreated to the garage. He sat on a folding chair next to his workbench, drank Budweiser, and didn't talk to anyone. He didn't need the internet to know what he'd done. He'd always known. And then Linda left me a voicemail. Not from a borrowed phone this time, from her own number, as if daring me to pick up. Her voice was stripped of the church meeting tremble. Raw. Hard. "Bianca, that article is destroying us. You need to fix this. Call that reporter and tell him to take it down." No apology. No, "I'm sorry." Not even, "How are you?" Just, "Fix this." Megan showed up on a Thursday evening, unannounced. I was in the kitchen making pasta, one serving, the way I'd learned to cook now, when the doorbell camera buzzed. There she was on the screen. Puffy eyes, messy ponytail, clutching her purse strap like a lifeline. She looked the way she always looked when she wanted something, wounded and slightly rehearsed. Part of me, the part Dr. Shaw was teaching me to listen to, wanted to see if Megan had actually changed. If the church meeting had cracked something open. So I opened the door. "Can I come in?" she whispered. "Please." I let her in. I poured her a glass of water. I sat across from her at the kitchen table, the table where Noah's booster seat still occupied the fourth chair, and I waited. Megan cried for 10 minutes straight. Real tears or performance tears. With Megan, I'd stopped being able to tell. She wiped her face with her sleeve and launched in. "Bianca, I can't take this anymore. Everyone hates us. Mom won't stop crying. Dad won't talk to anyone. I miss you." She glanced at the fridge, at Lily's drawing. "I miss Lily and Noah." First time she said their names since the emoji text. "I know I wasn't there," she continued. "I know it was wrong. But you have to understand. Mom said we'd go the next week, and I listened to Mom. I always listen to Mom." I nodded. "I understand." She seemed to relax. The tears slowed. She smoothed her hair. And then, like a door swinging open to reveal the room behind it, the real conversation started. "So, Jake left you money, right? The article mentioned the foundation. 5 million? She tried to sound casual. She failed. "That's a lot to manage alone. I could help. Like, be on the board or something. I'm between jobs right now and..." I set my glass down. "Megan, you didn't come to their funeral. You didn't call me for 3 months. And the first real conversation we're having, you're asking about money." Her face flushed. "That's not what I think you should go." She stood, grabbed her purse. At the door, she turned back with the only weapon she'd ever known how to use. "Mom is going to be really upset about this." I closed the door, gently, The way you close something you don't intend to open again. I called Robert the next morning. My family is starting to come around, I said. Not because they're sorry, because they found out about the money. Robert was quiet for a moment. I could hear him setting down his pen. What do you need, Bianca? Protection, for the foundation and for myself. He walked me through it calmly, the way he did everything. The foundation was a separate legal entity, a 501c3 with its own board, its own accounts, its own governance. No family member had any claim to it. My personal inheritance from Jake's insurance was exactly that. Personal. Connecticut law was clear. Life insurance proceeds go to the named beneficiary. Period. No parent, sibling, or cousin has standing to contest it. But what about the pressure? I asked. The showing up? The voicemails? The guilt trips? We send a letter, Robert said. Cease and desist. Formal. Firm. It asks them to stop unsolicited contact, stop appearing at your home without invitation, and stop approaching foundation partners or associates. It's not a lawsuit. It's not legally binding either, but it puts them on notice. If they escalate, we'll have documentation for a restraining order. I thought about that word. Boundary. Dr. Shaw used it every week. It had always sounded clinical to me, like something in a textbook, not something you mail to your mother. Send it, I said. Robert paused. Are you sure? Once this letter goes out, the tone changes. I looked at the kitchen counter. Jake's mug. Still there, still unwashed. I kept it that way on purpose. One small rebellion against a world that wanted me to move on faster than I could. Robert, the tone changed the night they chose a birthday party over 3 funerals. He sent the letter by certified mail the following Monday. 3 copies, 3 addresses. 3 members of a family that had spent my entire life treating my silence as permission. The silence was over. Linda called Robert's office 48 hours after the letter arrived. His receptionist later told me she could hear my mother's voice through the receiver from across the room. A cease and desist? From my own daughter? How dare you turn my child against her family? Robert took the call. He told me afterward that he kept his voice the same temperature the entire time. Room temperature. Steady. Professional. Mrs. Ashford, I represent Bianca's legal interests. The letter is clear. Please respect its terms. She's not thinking straight, Linda snapped. Grief has made her irrational. You and that insurance money are filling her head with, the terms are clear. Have a good day. He hung up. But Linda wasn't done. She never was. Within a week, she drafted a letter of her own. Handwritten on her good stationery, the cream-colored kind she used for church correspondence, and mailed copies to 6 members of the Women's Fellowship. In it, she described a daughter, lost to grief and bad counsel, a family torn apart by outside influences, and a mother who was desperately trying to reach her child before it's too late. She asked them to pray. She asked them to intervene. She asked them to see her as the victim. One of those copies reached Pastor Grace. Grace read it at her desk that evening. She told me later that she sat with it for a full hour, turning it over in her hands, feeling the weight of the paper and the weightlessness of the words. Then she picked up the phone. Linda, I've been patient, but I was at that funeral. I saw those empty seats. Her voice was quiet and absolutely final. I will not circulate this letter, and I think it's time you stop telling people a story that isn't true. Silence on the line, then a click. It was the first time in Linda Ashford's life that someone in her community had looked her in the eye, even through a phone line, and said, I don't believe you. Grace called me that same night. Bianca, I thought you should know. Your mother isn't stopping, but neither is the truth. 6 months after the article, just past the 1-year anniversary, the Myers Family Foundation, now officially a 501c3, with Mad Connecticut as its anchor partner, held its first fundraising gala. We booked the Pond House in Elizabeth Park, a bright, windowed venue that overlooked the rose gardens. Not flashy, not corporate, just a room full of light and people who cared. 150 guests. My ER colleagues filled 2 tables. The Mad Connecticut chapter sent their regional director. Tom Whitfield was there with a photographer from the Current. Families we'd helped sat in the front row, including Maria Santos from Bridgeport, whose son's funeral we'd paid for when she couldn't afford more than a pine box. Robert Calloway handled logistics. Pastor Grace gave the invocation. The coordinator I'd hired, a former social worker named Janet, ran the silent auction. Everything felt intentional, earned, real. When it was my turn to speak, I walked to the podium and looked out at 150 faces. The screen behind me glowed with 3 photographs. Jake in his Yukon sweatshirt, grinning. Lily on her first day of kindergarten, gap-toothed, holding a butterfly lunchbox. Noah at the beach, Captain the Bear sandy and soggy under one arm. I gripped the podium's edge, steadied myself. Then I spoke. My husband Jake believed in preparing for the worst, so the people he loved could have the best. He didn't know he'd be right. I paused. Swallowed. But because of him, 5 families this year didn't have to face their worst moments alone. 12 children still have a parent who can pay rent this month. 8 survivors are in counseling, and 3 funerals were held with dignity instead of debt. The room applauded. Maria Santos stood first, then the others. Tom's photographer captured the moment. Me at the podium, Jake's face on the screen, the audience rising. I didn't see them at first, but when the clapping faded and I stepped off the stage, I looked toward the back of the room, near the emergency exit half hidden behind a pillar. Linda and Megan, sitting in the last row, they hadn't been invited. Janet told me later they'd walked in during the dinner service when the check-in table was unmanned. She'd spotted them but didn't want to cause a scene mid-event. My mother stood near the coat rack in her Sunday lavender, the same dress from the church meeting. Her armor. She waited until the crowd around me thinned, until I was standing alone for a moment by the dessert table, holding a glass of water I hadn't sipped, and then she crossed the room. Bianca. Her voice was thick, practiced, eyes glistening under the event lighting. I'm so proud of you. 4 words I had waited 34 years to hear. And they arrived here, in front of a camera crew, surrounded by 150 witnesses, at an event she'd crashed. The timing told me everything the words didn't. Thank you for coming, I said. Polite, distant. The way you'd greet a colleague you barely knew. Linda flinched. Barely. Just a twitch at the corner of her mouth. But I saw it. Can we talk? She whispered. Somewhere private? There's nothing to discuss privately that wasn't already said publicly. I'm your mother, Bianca. I know. I held her gaze. That's what made it hurt. Megan appeared at Linda's elbow, breathless, as if she'd been gathering courage from across the room. Bianca, please. We're here. We showed up. I looked at my sister. She'd said those words like they should mean something, like physical presence erased everything. 6 months late, Megan. Before either of them could respond, Robert appeared at my side, calm, professional, perfectly timed. Bianca, the Maddie representative would like a moment with you before she leaves. I nodded. Excuse me, I said, to no one in particular, to both of them at once, and walked away. I didn't look back. But Janet told me later what happened. Linda stood in the center of that bright, crowded room, holding an untouched glass of sparkling water, and nobody spoke to her. Nobody approached. Nobody offered a chair. Megan tugged at her sleeve, and the 2 of them slipped out through the emergency exit. For the first time in her life, Linda Ashford walked into a room and discovered she was the least important person in it. The fallout came quietly. No explosions, no shouting matches. Just the slow, methodical rearrangement of a small town's loyalties. Within 2 weeks of the gala, Linda received a call from the Greenfield Community Church office. The Women's Fellowship was restructuring its leadership committee. Her position as co-chair, a role she'd held for 12 years, the crown jewel of her social identity, was being rotated to fresh voices. They thanked her for her years of service. They wished her well. The subtext was deafening. Linda stopped attending Sunday services after that. The first Sunday she missed, nobody called to check on her. The second Sunday, someone mentioned it at coffee hour and Barbara Hensley said, "She probably needs time." Nobody argued. Nobody disagreed. Nobody reached for the phone. The neighborhood shifted too. Carol Dunning organized the annual block party in June, a task Linda had claimed for 9 years running. The invitation list went out. The Ashford household wasn't on it. Megan lost her circle piece by piece. Old friends stopped texting back. A group chat she'd been in since high school went quiet whenever she posted. She started seeing a therapist in April. Whether out of genuine remorse or social survival, I honestly don't know. Maybe both. People are complicated, even the ones who hurt you. Then, on a Tuesday evening, my phone buzzed with a text from an unsaved number. I almost deleted it, but something made me read. I should have said something that night. I know that now. I'm sorry, kiddo. Not because of the article, because I was wrong. Dad. I read it twice, 3 times. Then I showed it to Dr. Shaw at our next session. "How does it feel?" she asked. I thought about it. Really thought. Like a door I don't need to open yet, but maybe someday. I saved the message. I didn't reply. Not yet. 1 year. November 14th again. A Tuesday. Just like the first one. Same gray Connecticut sky. Same damp chill that works its way under your collar and stays there. I drove to the cemetery before work. The graves were neat. I paid for maintenance, and I visited on the 1st and 15th of every month. But this day was different. This was the anniversary. The one everyone warns you about. I brought fresh flowers. Sunflowers for Jake, because he said roses were boring. A small bouquet of daisies shaped like butterflies for Lily. The florist had started making them special for me. And for Noah, a new captain. The original was buried with him, but I kept a rotation going. It felt right. It felt like something he'd understand. I sat on the grass between the 3 stones and talked to them the way I always did. Out loud, no self-consciousness, the way I used to talk to Jake while he was cooking and I was folding laundry in the next room. I told them about the foundation, about Maria Santos, whose son now had a headstone instead of a number, about the family in New London whose landlord had been about to evict them a week after their daughter's accident, about the grief counselor we'd hired full-time in January. I told Jake about his letter, how I kept it in my nightstand and read the last line whenever the house got too quiet, how I'd finally understood what he'd been doing those Sunday evenings, not hiding from me, but building a wall between me and the worst-case scenario. "You always said I'd take care of everyone but myself," I whispered. "I'm trying, Jake. I'm really trying." The wind picked up. The sunflowers bent sideways. Somewhere behind me, a cardinal landed on a branch and stayed there, watching me with one black eye, still as a heartbeat. I was different now. Not healed. I don't think that word applies. But different. Steadier. I said no when I meant no. I didn't apologize for taking up space. I didn't cook for people who hadn't earned a seat at my table. Dr. Shaw told me once, "You're not who you were a year ago." I said, "No. I'm who I should have been all along." If you're listening right now and you recognize your family in this story, the dismissiveness, the guilt trips, the way they make you feel like your pain is an inconvenience, I want you to hear something. You're not crazy. You're not dramatic. You're not ungrateful. Setting boundaries with family is the hardest thing I've ever done. Harder than 12-hour ER shifts. Harder than reading Jake's letter for the first time. Harder, even, than standing in front of those 3 caskets in the rain. Because with grief, at least the world understands. People bring you flowers. They lower their voices. They give you space. But when you set a boundary with family, half the world tells you you're wrong. She's still your mother. Blood is thicker than water. You'll regret this when she's gone. I've heard all of it. From coworkers, from neighbors, from well-meaning strangers in the comments of Tom's article. And I understand why people say those things. They're not bad people. They just haven't sat on a hospital floor at 10 o'clock at night, listening to birthday music through a phone speaker, 3 hours after the world ended. Here's what I learned. The thing nobody told me, and I had to figure out alone. The people who love you will show up. Not with excuses, not with conditions, not next week. They'll show up. Jake showed up. Every single day of our marriage, he showed up. My co-workers showed up. In black scrubs, straight off shift, standing in the rain. Pastor Grace showed up. Tom showed up. And now, every family the foundation helps, they're my family too. I'm not telling you to cut off your parents. That's your call, not mine. But I am telling you this. Your peace is not negotiable. And if someone treats your worst day as an inconvenience, you have every right to build a life without them in it. So where do things stand now? My father still texts sometimes. Short messages, never demanding. Thinking of you. Once. Saw a butterfly at the hardware store. Thought of Lily. I read everyone. I haven't replied yet. But I haven't blocked him either. That feels like enough for now. Linda is still Linda. Last month she recruited a family friend to call me. A woman named Diane who I haven't spoken to since high school. 10 minutes into the conversation, Diane casually mentioned, "Your mother isn't doing well. Her blood pressure, her nerves. Same playbook, same script." I recognized it the way you recognize a song you've heard 1,000 times. I wished Diane well and hung up. Megan sent a letter. Handwritten, on notebook paper. Not Linda's cream-colored stationery. Long. Messy. Ink smudges where she'd crossed things out and started over. "I'm in therapy now," she wrote. "I'm starting to see things I didn't want to see. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know." I put the letter in my nightstand drawer next to Jake's. I haven't answered it. Maybe I will. Maybe I won't. Forgiveness isn't a door I've closed. But it's not one I'll walk through just because someone knocks. The foundation is growing. In its second year, we've helped 15 families. Mad Connecticut is a full partner. I was asked to testify at the state capitol about DUI sentencing reform. I said yes. I still work the night shift at Mercy General. Still wear the scrubs. Still clock in at 7 and clock out at 7. The money didn't change what I do. It changed what I'm able to build around it. And every night before I sleep, I whisper the same thing into the quiet of an empty house that isn't really empty at all. Good night, Jake. Good night, Lily. Good night, Noah. I carried your love today. I'll carry it again tomorrow. Last week, a 4-year-old girl came into my ER. She'd fallen off a swing and fractured her wrist. Not serious. Routine. But she was clutching a stuffed rabbit, and she was crying the way Noah used to cry. That high, breathless wail that isn't about the pain. Not really. It's about being scared. About wanting someone to say, "You're okay. I'm here." I held her good hand while Dr. Patel set the splint. I told her she was brave. I told her the rabbit was brave too. She stopped crying and asked me if the rabbit could have a bandage. I wrapped a piece of gauze around the rabbit's paw and she smiled so wide it broke something open inside my chest. I made it to the supply closet. 30 seconds. That's all I needed. 30 seconds to press my forehead against the shelf, breathe, and let the wave pass. Then I went back in. Finished my shift. Drove home. Grief doesn't end. It just changes shape. Some days it's a wave that knocks you sideways. Some days it's a whisper. But it's always there, always present, and that's okay. Because it means I loved them, and love doesn't expire. Jake left me $5 million, but the real inheritance was the lesson, the one I'm still learning, every day, every shift, every time I visit those 3 graves with fresh flowers and a new captain for Noah. Show up, not next week, not when it's convenient, not when the party's over. Now, if you're someone's person, be there. And if you can't be there, at least don't pretend you were. My name is Bianca Myers. I'm an ER nurse, a widow, a mother of angels, and the founder of the Myers Family Foundation. I'm still standing. Not because my family held me up, but because I finally learned to hold myself. And that's my story. Thank you for staying until the end. Now I want to hear yours. Drop a comment below. Have you ever had to set a boundary with someone you love? What happened? If Bianca's journey gave you even a little strength today, hit that subscribe button. And if you need another story like this one, there's one waiting for you in the description. I'll see you there.